Welcome to Fight Club 24/7. My name's Johnny Rashman. Right, let's get straight into it. We all saw the footage yesterday of Tyson Fury's dad, John, putting it on Cole Frampton, who remarkably stated that Jake Paul would beat Tommy Fury. Now, I can understand that from people who don't really watch the sport or don't understand the levels involved, but coming from someone in the sport, and especially from a decorated fighter like Cole Frampton, former world champion, it's incredibly disrespectful. And I love Cole Frampton, but to suggest that Jake Paul would beat Tommy Fury isn't just an opinion. It's very disrespectful. And if Cole Frampton wants to make remarks like that, then tell him to analyse the fight. He knows how to break down a fight. I want to see him analyse the fight if he wants to state that, because he's talking absolute nonsense. So I'm going to analyse the fight. Very simple. Let's look at Jake Paul as a pro boxer. Take away the profile, take away the constant talk, take away the outlandish statements, it's just talk. Take away all that and let's look at him as a professional fighter, which is what we have to class him as. Even though he isn't a professional fighter, he has got a professional license. So that's what I'm going to class him as. First of all, his jab. His jab is extremely poor. Right? Doesn't double it up, doesn't vary it, doesn't really have any power, doesn't use a screw uppercut, no variation in it. It's extremely poor, right? His fights against Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley, he does the same move. He feints to the body and comes with the overhand right. That's fine when you're doing it against people who can't box. Tyron Woodley can't box, Ben Askren can't box. That's it. They're not boxers. They can't box. They may have done an element of boxing in the MMA training, but they're not good. They weren't good strikers in MMA, and they are extremely low-level boxers to the point where they won't beat journeymen. Again, take away the profiles. Ben Askren is one of the worst strikers I've ever seen in life in general, not even from a professional aspect. He's an awful striker. Great grappler, right? Great MMA fighter. Sensationally poor as a boxer. Awful, right? So you can't go off that knockout. Anyone can look good when you're fighting someone levels below you. I look like Floyd Mayweather when I'm boxing someone who's not as good as me, right? So you can't look into that. Again, Tyron Woodley, awful boxer, does the same thing, feints to the body, overhand right. Woodley went down like he'd been shot like Godzilla. Those two fights were extremely manufactured. Tyron Woodley went in there not to win. It's as simple as that. I'm not saying he dived or there was a certain amount of the time in the fight where he would go down, but he went there not to win the fight, right? That's why this 500,000 knockout bonus. I mean, we can all say it existed. Let's see it in the contract. Proofs in the pudding. You saw that fight. Did Tyron Woodley look like he was on a $500,000 knockout bonus? He didn't, did he? So again, you can't go into that. So the jab, awful, right? Foot movement from Jake Paul, extremely poor, like to the point where I don't even know what he's working on. It's that poor. Plods forward, crosses his feet over, always off balance. When you're a boxer, and if you're going from side to side, you don't cross your feet. Reason being, if you were to cross your feet, you're off balance. So if someone nudges you, you'd go backwards. So if someone fully punches you, you'd go down, wouldn't you? Right? So he's always off balance. He's crossing his feet. He's never going in and out. You just see him stood there, the same thing, and he just sort of crawls around the ring, crossing the feet like this, blowing. Awful, right? His combination punching, shot selection is extremely poor. He's got one shot, which he throws okay to white collar level. White collar level is not professional level. It's not amateur level. Jake Paul is an amateur boxer. To be an amateur boxer, you've got to be of a very high standard because the best fight the best. He isn't an amateur. People get confused with that. He's a white collar fighter, which is basically an unlicensed fighter, right? His combination punching is poor. Like I say, he just sets the same shot up, goes to the body and swings that overhand right. And by the way, that overhand right that he throws, it may look good, but it's actually technically really poor because when he throws it, he falls into the shot, which means you're off balance. So if you're fighting any decent boxer, not a world champion or nothing, just any competent boxer, they'd very simply just block it, counter him, and he'd fall on the floor because he's all over the place. Or they'd step back and counter him. Look at it, slow it down. When he throws the overhand right, he's falling in. His feet are everywhere. If you look at professional fighters who throws that shot, they'll throw it and then they'll come back out. Their body shape will remain the same. It will remain tall, strong. The foundations are there. Jake Paul just falls into it, so he's completely off balance. He never throws any other shots apart from that right hand. You very rarely see him going to the body. He might throw ones and twos. I saw him throw a 3-punch combo against Woodley, but that's it. You don't see him tapping the top, then going straight to the body, or tapping the body and going to the top. You don't see him setting things up. There's no variation as his shots. He's not thinking as a boxer, right? Because he isn't a boxer. You can put him on the theatre. You can have the big lights. You can have Michael Buffer announcing you. You can have Showtime on there. You can have 24/7 type series. Doesn't matter. Strip that away. Strip it all back and look at what he does in the ring as a boxer. And he doesn't throw any combinations. He's very poor. You never see him going to the body, going to the head, or uppercut, left hooks, screw shots. Shot selection is extremely poor. Head movement, extremely poor. You never see him slipping, dipping, rolling shots. Awful. Just extremely poor, right? His distance, again, is not great. You just see him plod forward. You never really see him at a great distance. He's always there to be hit. He's not getting hit because he's not fighting people who can throw punches. Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley are terrible boxers. And the other one, Anderson Gibb, just garbage. Absolute garbage, all of them. They can't box. They can box to white collar level, but we're talking professional level. They can't box. So you can get away with making mistakes. You can throw sloppy overhand rights and it can connect and they'll go down. But that's not going to happen against a competent boxer. His fitness, again, for pro boxing, I mean, he's going straight into 8 rounds, which no professional boxer who has any aspirations does, unless you're coming from an extremely decorated amateur career. In pro boxing, you go through the levels. You have 4 rounders, 6 rounders, 8 rounders. You don't just jump into 8 rounds. So his fitness is bad, isn't it? It's poor. It's very poor. You see him blown like a goldfish, going red as a lobster. Defensive capabilities. Again, his defensive capabilities are extremely poor, really bad. You never see him blocking, parrying the shots. You never see him catching shots and countering. You never see him defending. You never see him blocking shots. You never see him parrying. You just don't see a defensive outlook. There's no defensive shape to him. His hands are always like this. Very basic. A 6-year-old could go into a gym and the first thing you're taught is you put your glove on your chin to protect it. A lot of his shots is like this. You never see him like this or doing a shoulder roll or like this. It's always like this. You're going to get taken out, aren't you? So again, you're putting all these factors in. A very poor pro boxer. Extremely poor. He wouldn't beat a journeyman. Tommy Fury. Right. No one is saying Tommy Fury is going to be a world champion. No one is saying he's a world-class prospect. But the guy's a professional boxer. He's been around boxing his whole life. He's been in training camps. He's had real fights. Now, Tommy Fury has went on Love Island to build his profile, right? But it's extremely hard. You can ask any boxer. It's extremely difficult when you can make treble the money appearing in a nightclub, right? You can earn millions of pounds, right? Or you can box and earn 5, 10 grand or 20 grand against a journeyman or someone who has to develop him as a fighter. He's not going to fight world champions. He's learning on the job, Tommy. He didn't have an extensive amateur career. He did have an amateur career at a young age, which means he's been doing boxing a long time. Jake Paul hasn't, right? Just because you've got money and you can look like a fighter and you talk like a fighter doesn't mean you're a fighter, right? There's certain fundamentals as a boxer that Tommy's gone through as a kid, which is foot movement, defense, jab. If you watch Tommy Fury's jab, he's got a decent jab. He doubles it up. He sets up the right hand. He varies it. He's got a decent jab, right? Distance. Tommy Fury's distance is decent. It's okay, right? Compared to Jake Paul, it's unbelievably good. You always see him go like this, Tommy Fury, with his hand. So he'll throw a punch and he'll go like this. And what that is doing is gauging the distance. So if he's an arm's length away from someone, he's not going to get hit. If he comes in close, he's going to get hit. So you'll see him throw combinations and then back off and just go like that, get the distance. He's judging distance. That comes from being in an amateur gym. That comes from being around boxing. It's basic boxing movement, right? You're judging your distance. You can only do that by having a lot of time in the ring, sparring, fighting, training, doing pad work. Jake Paul just hasn't had that. Right, all this nonsense. He's locked himself in the gym. He's been training 10 hours a day. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense, right? Yes, he's put a lot of hours in and he's developed himself from a YouTube fighter, right? He's done better than what people thought, but he's not a pro boxer, right? He can't compete with pro fighters, which is why he doesn't fight pro fighters. Tommy Fury, it's ingrained in him. He has those boxing fundamentals. Yes, he can improve, but he's been ingrained in him since he was a kid, so he understands distance, right? Shot selection. Again, Tommy Fury throws decent shots. He'll go to the body, he'll go to the top, he'll set things up. He doesn't just throw a big sloppy overhand right. He actually throws the punch. His body mechanics are set up decently, right? He can be a lot better, but you can tell he's got boxing fundamentals. Foot movement, again, you see him. You don't see him crossing his feet all the time. You see him going in. You can see him going in and out of distance, going around. His body shape remains the same. Defensively, again, you see him ducking, slipping shots. Obviously, compared to pro boxing standard, there's a lot to work on. But comparing him to Jake Paul, he's a different stratosphere to Jake Paul. So we're talking jabs, we're talking shot selection, we're talking distance, foot movement. If we're looking at it like that, you've got Jake Paul there and Tommy Fury there. So from a boxing point of view, Jake Paul doesn't do anything better than Tommy Fury. He doesn't. So how can he beat Tommy Fury? This is what I don't understand. So I'd like Carl Fandon to actually understand, to actually come out and explain why does he think Jake Paul will beat Tommy Fury? Come and explain, analyse it, because there's nothing he does better than Tommy Fury. And he's never fought a pro boxer. Tommy Fury's fought pro boxers. Jordan Grant, is a decent boxer. Just because you're not a world champion or a British champion doesn't mean you're a terrible boxer. There's levels in boxing, and this is what people have got confused about with Jake Paul's manipulation. Is that they're thinking you can just train a few hours and smile for the camera and talk a load of waffle, and you can be a professional fighter and fight world champion. Doesn't work like that. So if Tommy Fury was to fight Jake Paul, do you know what would happen? Tommy Fury would bust him up with a jab. He'd easily see the shots coming, right? Jake Paul would be his big chin, which is like Jaws. You've seen the film Jaws? It's actually bigger than Jaws. It's absolutely massive, that chin. He'd just absolutely get wiped out with a right hand. I mean, it'd crush him. Absolutely crush him. Tommy Fury would crush him. Smash him to pieces. It would last a round or two. It really would. It would be complete destruction. There's nothing Jake Paul could bring to the table that Tommy Fury would be worried about. That he doesn't bring an element of danger. People say he's got power. He's not got power. He's knocking out people weight classes below him. Let me see him knock out someone his own size. Right, let's see that before you start saying he's got power. The fight would be a massacre. Tommy Fury would just destroy him. He'd destroy him to the body. He'd put in body shot. He'd bust him with a jab, sink in body shots, and then just wipe him out with a right hand. It wouldn't be competitive. They won't fight. People can say Tommy Fury ducked out. Like very simple. If he right, okay, he didn't have the fight. Injuries happen. Jake Paul could have fought another pro boxer. Why is he not? Why didn't he bring in a pro boxer? Did he? There's a reason for it. There's a reason why he doesn't fight pro boxers. So Don't be brought in by the manipulation. He can say what he wants, but the cold hard fact is he's never fought a pro boxer. You can't compare Tommy Fury to him because Tommy Fury has had amateur fights and he's been around gyms and he's fought pro boxers. Every single one of Tommy's opponents would beat Jake Paul. That's the simple reality of this. If they ever fought, Tommy Fury would destroy him. It's as simple as that. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think.